Welcome! Today we'll be discussing Chapter 22, which focuses on sustainable cities. I'm Sonia.
I'm Amy.
And I'm Rebecca.
Half of the people in the world live in urban areas, and this urbanization has led to four major trends.
The proportion of global population living in urban areas is increasing. The urban areas are developing rapidly in number and size.
Urban growth has been slower in developed countries, and poverty has increased more in urbanized areas, mostly in developed countries.
In this picture, you are currently seeing an image of major urban areas in the world. Now we are going to look further into the United States and the phases of urbanization it underwent. These four phases occurred between 1800 and 2008.
The first one was the mass migration from rural areas to central cities, then the migration from large central cities to suburbs and smaller cities.
Next, there was the migration from north and east to south and west, and finally the migration from cities and suburbs to developed rural areas.
And urban sprawl is the uncontrolled expansion of urban areas, which is what happened to the countrysides in the United States.
This was because of various influential factors such as ample land, federal government loans, the need for highways, low-cost gasoline, multiple tax laws that encourage home ownership, state and local zoning laws, and poor urban planning.
The effects of the urban sprawl resulted in the Bow Wash, which is the area extending from Boston to Washington. This includes New York City, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, which are known for their heavy population.
However, the urban sprawls also have a negative impact on the environment. They degrade the natural capital, they impact land and biodiversity, water, energy, air, climate, and have a negative effect on the economy.
They impact land and biodiversity by the loss of cropland, forests, grasslands, wetlands, and the fragmentation of wildlife habitats.
The water is affected by the increased use of surface and groundwater, the increase of runoff, flooding, and population, which therefore decreases the natural sewage treatment.
Urban sprawls also affect the energy, air, and climate by increasing the energy use, waste, pollution, greenhouse emissions, and enhancing global warming.
If you're one of those people that doesn't care about the environment, then you might think that this doesn't concern you. However, urban sprawls also affect the economy. How may you ask? Well, they cause a decline in downtown business districts, increase in unemployment, and the loss of tax base in central cities. Now that we know what urbanization is, why would we want to use it? There are huge advantages to cities, including jobs, education, industry creation, commerce creation, plus better access to medical facilities. Not only do cities benefit, but the environment does as well. Recycling programs are created and biodiversity is preserved in urban areas. Also, if people put effort to use mass transportation, like public transportation, a lot of energy can be saved.
Our ecological footprints are growing.
Many people who live in cities have little passion for biodiversity and the sustainability of the planet because they are so far removed from biodiverse areas of the planet.
Most of you watching this probably live in an urban area and contribute to the consumption of 75% of the Earth's resources and production of 75% of the Earth's CO2 emissions.
It really sucks because we only occupy about 2% of the world's land. Think about the city you live in. Notice how most of the trees and plants are destroyed to make room for new buildings?
That beautiful skyline you have, say goodbye to natural shade, air purifiers, and wildlife habitats.
We have water problems too.
Canals and wells must be built to supply for the increasing demand for water in cities.
A lot of our cities are built on floodplains or near rivers, like the Chicago River, making them easy for targets for flooding. Cities are the centers of pollution.
We depend on transportation in our everyday lives to go to school, work, and to travel. Nevertheless, we are not consciously aware of the harmful impacts it causes to the environment.
However, motor vehicles have some serious negative impacts on the environment. Did you know they are the largest source of outdoor air pollution, and they also help create urban sprawls, which we have learned have their own consequences? Although we know that they are harmful to the environment, they're also dangerous to our safety. Motor vehicles have an alarming rate of accidents, which often result in death or injury, and they cause traffic congestion. Who wants that? Despite all the negative impacts motor vehicles have, they also have some positive effects too. They enable us to create jobs in production, repair and build roads, and supply fuel. Finally, they facilitate our mobility and convenience. We might think that reducing automobiles is not possible, but we can accomplish it. Cars aren't the only way to get around. Some alternatives are bikes, buses, and rail systems. Bikes are the best alternative. They promote fitness and produce no emissions at a very low cost.
Most urban and some rural areas use some form of land use planning to determine the best use for each piece of land.
Urban land use planning can help to reduce uncontrolled sprawl and low degradation of air, water, land, biodiversity, and other natural resources.
Let's take a second to talk about zoning.
When a plan for a piece of land is developed, the government controls the uses by legal and economic methods.
Most common is zoning, in which various pieces of land are designated for certain uses.
Smart growth can encourage environmentally sustainable development that reduces dependence on cars, controls and directs sprawl, and cuts wasteful resource use.
Tools that are used to control urban growth and sprawl include limiting or regulating, zoning, planning, protecting, tax breaks, revitalization, and new growth.
To preserve open space outside a city, you can draw an urban growth line or boundary around a community to allow no urban development outside those boundaries.
You can also preserve space in the form of large urban parks or surrounding cities with green belts, an open area reserved for non-destructive uses.
In the United States, the top 10 greenest cities are as follows: Portland, Oregon; San Francisco, California; Eugene, Oregon; Cambridge, Massachusetts; Berkeley, California; Chicago, surprisingly; Austin, Texas; and Minneapolis, Minnesota.
How can we make our cities more sustainable and livable? One way is growing urbanism.
Implementing cluster developments is a good way to start.
Cluster developments have housing units on one side of the land and wilderness and natural space surrounding them.
Developing entire villages and mid-sized neighborhoods within cities with new urbanism will also help in this process.
Walkability, mixed use and diversity, quality urban design, environmental sustainability, and smart transportation are all things that would be incorporated into these newly urbanized areas.
Another way to grow urbanism is by creating eco-cities.
These cities will be people-oriented and not car-oriented.
Depending largely on recycled water will help reduce pollution and waste.
It will also be essential to provide educational, sustained opportunities and promote urban gardens and farmers markets.
Similar to eco-cities is the eco-village movement.
Small groups of people will come together to produce more sustainable villages and towns.
To review, Section 22.1. What are the major population trends in urban areas? Urbanization continues to increase steadily, and the numbers and sizes of urban areas are growing rapidly, especially in developing countries. 22.2. Most cities are unsustainable because of the high levels of resource use, waste, pollution, and poverty. 22.3. How does transportation affect urban environmental impacts? A combination of plentiful land, inexpensive fuel, and expanding network of highways in many areas has resulted in dispersed cities whose residents depend on motor vehicles for transportation. 22.4. How important is urban land use planning? Urban land use planning can help reduce uncontrolled sprawl and slow the resulting degradation of air, water, land, biodiversity, and other natural resources. 22.5. How can cities become more sustainable and livable? An eco-city allows people to choose walking, biking, or mass transportation, recycle or reuse most of their waste, grow much of their food, and protect biodiversity by preserving surrounding land. These are the ways that you can become a more great person.